The silent test. You know what's strange? Trust isn't built in grand moments. It's built in the seconds between words. In the pauses. In what you don't say about someone who isn't there. I was sitting in a dim cafe last Tuesday. Rain against the windows. That kind of gray afternoon that makes everything feel muted. Soft. There was a woman at the table next to me. Early 30s, maybe. On the phone. And I heard her say. She just doesn't get it, you know? I've tried explaining, but she's so defensive. It's exhausting. The barista, this quiet guy with tired eyes, glanced up. Just for a second. And I saw something shift in his face. A closing. Like a door gently shutting. When she ordered her second coffee, he was polite. Professional. But different. Distant. She didn't notice. But I did. Because I've been on both sides of that moment. What we're actually measuring. There's a test happening in every conversation. You don't announce it. Nobody hands you a score. But it's there. Underneath everything. People are asking. If I mess up around you, what happens to me? Do I become the story you tell later? The villain in your narrative? And here's the thing. You answer that question every single time you talk about someone else. Every time. When you describe a conflict. When you mention an ex. When you explain why a friendship ended. When you talk about the coworker who frustrated you. When you recount the family drama. People are listening. Not just to the facts. To how you distribute blame. The pattern you can't unsee. Once you notice this, you see it everywhere. Like a frequency you suddenly tuned into. Someone tells you their relationship ended. Listen to how they tell it. Do they say, he was controlling, manipulative? I finally saw through it. Or, we weren't right for each other. I think we both brought our damage to it. I definitely had my part. One version makes them the survivor. The other makes them human. And your nervous system knows the difference. Immediately. Instinctively. Because if they can't see their own mess in the rearview mirror. If they can't name one thing they do differently. If every story ends with them blameless and someone else broken. Your body whispers. Don't get too close. This isn't safe. My friend who nobody calls anymore. I have this friend. Let's call him James. Smart guy. Successful. Charming at parties. Great conversationalist. But I've watched something happen over the years. People drift away from him. Not loudly. Not dramatically. They just stop reaching out. And I think I finally understand why. Every story James tells has a villain. The girlfriend who couldn't handle honesty. The business partner who lacked vision. The friend who got too sensitive. The therapist who didn't understand him. And maybe, he's right about all of it. Maybe every single person actually did fail him. But when you're listening to him, there's this feeling. This tightness in your chest. Because there's never a moment where he says, I probably pushed too hard. Or, looking back, I see how I made that worse. Or, I was going through something and I took it out on them. Never. And every time he tells another story, you feel it. If we ever have a problem, I'm next. I'll be the one who couldn't handle it. Who got too sensitive. Who didn't understand. That's not friendship. That's walking on eggshells. Waiting for your turn to be the story. The people we actually let in. You know who I trust? My friend Rachel. I remember this one conversation we had. We were sitting on her apartment floor. Wine glasses. Late night. That hour where truth gets easier. She was telling me about a falling out with her sister. Messy stuff. Old wounds. Money and boundaries and all of it. And she said, I was so angry. Like, shaking angry. And I said things I can't take back. Pause. And I know some of that anger wasn't even about her. I was carrying stuff from work, from mom, from everything. She caught all of it. Another pause. Longer. But also, she really did cross a line. And I'm still figuring out where the line is between my overflow and her actual behavior. That was it. That was the whole thing. She didn't let herself off the hook. But she didn't drown in guilt either. She just sat in the complicated middle. The messy human truth. And I remember thinking. I could tell her anything. Anything. Because if I hurt her, even accidentally, she wouldn't rewrite me into a monster. She'd sit with the complexity. She'd hold both things. I was hurt. And they're still human. That's safety. That's trust. What this looks like in small moments. The test isn't always about big betrayals. Sometimes it's tiny. Barely noticeable. Someone mentions a friend cancelled plans. Do they say, ugh, she's so flaky. Always does this. Or, she cancelled again. I'm frustrated. But I also know she's drowning right now. Still hurts, though. One of those makes space for human complexity. One of those doesn't. Or this. Someone's describing a team conflict at work. Do they say, everyone else is just coasting. I'm the only one who actually cares. Or, I think I care about this project differently than they do. And I'm realizing I've been kind of intense about it. Probably annoying, honestly. Same situation. Completely different safety level. When I failed this test, and didn't know it. I want to tell you about a time I got this wrong. Badly. A few years ago, I had a creative partnership fall apart. We were working on something together. It collapsed. Painfully. And for months, maybe a year, I told the same story. I did all the work. They checked out. They got distracted. I was the only one who cared. I told it to friends. To new people I met. To myself in the shower. I believed it. Completely. Then one night, someone I respected said something that stopped me cold. She said, I hear you. I do. But I'm curious, what do you think they'd say about what happened? Silence. Because I had no idea. I'd never asked that question. I'd never stepped outside my own story long enough to imagine their version. So I sat with it. 4 days. Weeks. And slowly, painfully, I started to see the gaps in my narrative. The times I assumed they knew what I needed without saying it. The moments I got cold instead of addressing the problem. The ways I pulled back emotionally and called it protecting myself. The unrealistic expectations I never actually voiced. I wasn't the villain. But I wasn't the hero either. I was just a person. Imperfect. Partially responsible. Human. And once I could hold that. Once I could say out loud. I got some of that wrong. I noticed something shift. People started trusting me differently. Deeper. Not because I was better, but because I was honest. The paradox nobody tells you. Here's the strange thing. The people who admit fault are the ones we trust more, not less. When someone says, "I handled that badly," or "I see now how I hurt them," or "I didn't mean to, but I did," your nervous system relaxes. Because you think, "Oh, this person lives in reality. They're not performing innocence. They're not hiding." And that, weirdly, makes them safe. Because you know, if you mess up with them, they won't rewrite history. They won't make you the villain just to keep themselves clean. They'll sit in the mess with you. The people who can't pass. I want to be gentle here. Because this isn't about judgment. But some people can't pass this test. Not because they're bad. Because they're terrified. Somewhere along the line, they learned. Being wrong equals being worthless. Making a mistake equals being the mistake. So they protect themselves. Fiercely. By making sure every story has a clear villain. And that villain is never them. I've had people in my life like this. People I cared about. Still care about. But I can't go deep with them. Because deep requires honesty. And honesty requires the ability to say, "I got this wrong." And if they're not there yet, they're not there. I can't force it. I can't love them into it. I can't create enough safety to make them feel safe admitting fault. That's their work. Not mine. What this means for you. If you're reading this thinking, "Oh God, do people not trust me?" Breathe. This isn't about perfection. It's about willingness. Willingness to look at your part. Willingness to sit with the discomfort of being partially wrong. Willingness to say, out loud, "I don't come out looking great here. But this is what happened." That's it. You don't have to be a saint. You don't have to take blame for things that aren't yours. You don't have to over-apologize or diminish your hurt. You just have to be human enough to say, "This is complicated. And I'm part of the complication." The test is always running. Every time you talk about someone who isn't in the room, people are listening for how you'll talk about them when they're not there. Every time you describe a conflict, people are imagining what you'd say about a conflict with them. Every time you assign blame, people are calculating. Would I survive a mistake with this person? Or would I become their next story? And that answer determines everything. Not just whether they trust you. Whether they let you in. Whether they call you at 2 a.m. Whether they tell you the true thing. Whether they stay. The weight of being seen clearly. Here's what I've learned. People don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be honest. They need to know that if they show you their mess, their selfishness, their pettiness, their mistakes, you won't flatten them into a villain. They need to know there's room for their full humanity in your world. The good parts and the ugly parts. Because we all have ugly parts. All of us. And the people who pretend they don't? Those are the people we keep at arm's length. The people who say, "Yeah, I've got ugly parts too." Those are the people we build lives with. The cafe again. I think about that woman sometimes. The one on the phone. How sure she sounded. How clear the lines were in her story. And I wonder if she noticed the barista pull back. If she felt the subtle shift. Or if she just moved through her day, telling the same story. Never wondering why people don't quite soften around her anymore. And I think about myself. How many times have I done that? How many times have I told a story where I came out clean? How many times have I failed this test without even knowing it was happening? More than I want to admit. But I'm trying now. Trying to notice. Trying to pause and ask. What would they say happened? Trying to hold the mess instead of flattening it into a narrative where I'm blameless. Because here's what I know. The stories we tell about other people are mirrors. They show everyone listening. This is how I handle being wrong. This is how I distribute responsibility. This is what happens if you disappoint me. And people believe you. They believe the mirror. The truth about trust. Trust isn't built in declarations. It's built in the margins. In how you describe the person who hurt you. In whether you can name your own contribution to the collapse. In whether there's room for nuance in your narratives. People are watching. Not consciously. But deeply. And they're asking. Is there room for my humanity here? Or only for the version of me that never messes up? And if the answer is the latter. If there's no room for mistakes in your world. They'll smile. They'll be friendly. They'll stay surface. But they won't let you in. They can't. Because letting you in means being human around you. And being human means sometimes being wrong. And if wrong isn't allowed. If every story needs a villain. Then they already know. One day, it'll be them. The end, or the beginning. So here's the question. When you tell stories about the people who've hurt you, disappointed you, left you. Is there room for complexity? Is there a moment where you say, and I also? Or is the story clean? Neat? Them, wrong. You, right. Because that answer. That single answer. Determines who trusts you. And how deeply. And for how long. The test is silent. But it's always running. The question is. Are you passing?